Hi, this is Lee. I'm going to attempt to do a beginner's Inkscape series of videos. You guys know probably most of my videos are geared towards people who already have a basic understanding of the Inkscape tools and functions, but I'm in a group of people who said that they would be interested in a beginner tutorial. There's quite a few out there on YouTube, and they're all good, and you can always learn something new from a different person's style of presenting things. So I thought I would just go through some of the basics that I use often. So first of all, we're looking at the Inkscape canvas now. I've just opened the program and you can see that there's tools on the top, there's tools on the side, there's colors down at the bottom, there's all sorts of stuff. What does all this stuff do? So the first thing we're going to look at is the canvas area, and that's this black outline here. I have got my document set up to be a 12 by 12 area because I usually am designing for design space, and a 12 by 12 area is what the Cricut mat, the standard Cricut mat is. Um, if you open your Inkscape document, it will probably be 8.5 by 11. You can change that, but for this, it's fine to just leave it as it is. So now what else do we have? Over here on the left side, we have your main tools basically, and I will go through a couple of these in this video and then the rest of them that I use often in subsequent videos. You also have a ruler here on the side. You can actually click on that and pull down a guideline. That is very useful. Keyboard shortcut Control Z is one I use all the time. That's undo. So clicking Control Z twice to undo pulling out those guides. If your screen does not look like this, if there are some things that are missing, you can go up to View and Show Hide, and that gives you all of these things that you can or cannot show. You can customize your screen however you want it to look. I like for everything to show because I use almost everything on here except for maybe this. So if something's not showing up, you can just go up to View, Show Hide, and turn things on and off. Okay, so now down at the bottom of the screen, you will see a color palette. You can click colors here to fill in an object or do the stroke of an object. The fill is the inside part, the stroke is the outline. You can change the palette, but I like to leave it as this palette for most of the time. Up here at the top, we have some specific tools, and these tools will change depending on which of these main tools you have chosen. So right now I have the selector tool, and it's given me some options for that tool. If I come down here and click on the rectangle square tool, you can see it gives me different options, and I'll explain those as we go through the tools. But each tool basically has its own specific things you can change up here at the top. And then of course you have your regular menu here, file for saving things, edit, we'll have to go through each of these. View changes how you see the screen. Layer, I don't do layers much when I'm designing for Cricut Design Space, just because it kind of messes things up when you try to import different layers. Object, this gives you object options. Path we'll use a lot, and I'll have to explain those as we go through them. Text is going to give you ways of dealing with text that you enter. Then filters and extensions are some more advanced things that I might get to later. But for basic design, usually filters aren't going to be very useful for cutting designs. Extensions will probably use a couple of those. Okay, and so then over here, these are just some shortcuts to most of the stuff up here. So it'll be like save, print, stuff like that. And then over here on the far right are your snapping tools, and I will explain those as I use them. They can be very useful, but they can also, if they're turned on, they can do some things and you're like, what's going on? And you're like, oh, your snapping tools are on, because it likes to snap things to a certain point. And sometimes it can make it difficult to manipulate things on the page if snapping tools is on. Okay, so let's see. I think I'm going to skip to the square tool first. So I'm going to click on that. Now, if you'll see, if I'm on the selector tool, my cursor is an arrow. Now I click on the square tool and it gives me a little crosshair, plus it's showing me the color default that my square is going to be. So I'm just going to draw, I'm going to click and drag to draw a rectangle. All right. So now if you look at this, I'm going to use the plus key to zoom in, and I'm using the scroll to reorient myself on the canvas. Okay, so now I've zoomed in and here's my square. At this point, this is a rectangle. If I look down here, let's see, I've got it selected. If I look down here on the info bar, that tells me that is a rectangle. It's in layer 1. When it's a rectangle, it's not technically, it's an object, but it's a special object. You can do things to rectangles that you can't do to other objects. So I'm going to click back on the rectangle tool and go through some of those. If I click on this little square here, I can change the size that way. Here I can change the size this way. And this is a special thing that only works on rectangles, is this little circle here. If I click on that and drag it, I can round my corners. Okay, so also while it's a rectangle, I can go up here and I can change the dimensions. So I can change the width to, say if I want specifically 5 and I want the height to be 4, I can change those. These two, Rx and Ry, changes the radius of the corner. Ry is what's adjusted when I do, if you look up here, you can see that that number's changing as I move this radius. I can also give it a radius on the x-axis too, that way. That's controlled, let's see. Yeah, right there. I didn't see that one before, but it gives me another circle to control that. Ooh, I just drew another square. Okay, so let's see, I'm going to click on that, select it, and I'm just going to put the corner radiuses back to 0. Okay? It's not very exciting, it's a rectangle, but this is the start of learning all sorts of things. Now, let's say I don't want a pink rectangle, I want a red rectangle. There's 2 ways to change it that I know of. The first way is to just come down here with that object selected and click on my color palette. I've changed it to a red rectangle now. If I want to change the outline or the stroke, I hold down Shift and click on the color palette. That changes the stroke. So not holding anything down and clicking changes the fill. Holding down Shift and clicking changes the stroke. Another way you can do this is you can open the fill and stroke panel. I like to do that with the keyboard shortcut Control-Shift-F. Okay, now you can see that this pops up. Fill and stroke, Shift-Control-F, it tells you the keyboard shortcut right there. This first tab is the fill. I don't have it selected. Let's see, I got to click on it to select it. And now you can see it gives me the RGB values for my red fill. There's a couple of different ways you can look at the color values. You can do RGB, HSL, CMYK. You can choose on a color wheel. I don't know what CMS is. It looks like it's just opacity. I usually use either RGB or CMYK. Okay, then if I'm on the fill, I can just click here and change the fill this way. Also, you can input the numbers directly if you have, like, say, a Pantone color or an RGB or CMYK recipe for a specific color. You can just enter those numbers manually and change it. So that's the fill panel. If I click on the stroke paint, that allows me to change the color of the stroke. So I can come over here, click and change. If you look at like the RGB palette, you have R, G, and B, and then this last one is A. A is transparency. So if I pull that down, that stroke becomes more transparent. Sometimes if you're having problems, you're like, why is everything on my page see-through? It's this A value here. And CMYK has it also. Okay, so that is the stroke paint. Then you can also do stroke style. So here I've clicked on the tab Stroke Style, and I can change the width of that. I like to go in pixels because that makes sense to me. I can change the stroke to 10 pixels. Now it's thicker. I can change it to 1 pixel. Now it's very thin. I can change it to 0 to have no stroke. Oh, also you can do, let's change it back to 5 here. If I want to use the color palette to change that to no fill or no stroke, Like for no stroke, I hold down Shift and come click on this X here. That gives none. Hold down Shift, click on black, that gives me a black outline. If I want the fill to be transparent, I don't hold down Shift, but click on the X. Now the fill is transparent. Okay? Let's see, for stroke style again, and whenever you're working with an object, the object you want to change needs to be selected. So if I want to change this square, it has to be selected. If I don't have it selected, this is all grayed out and I can't do anything. Select it, and now it shows me the properties for that object. Okay, back to the stroke style. I can change that stroke to dashes, like this, whatever kind of dashes. Now it's important to know that the stroke does not come into Design Space as it is. As a stroke, Design Space does not recognize this outline. There are ways to get around that, like say if I wanted to do a square that was just like telling somebody cut here with your scissors. I have to manipulate this. If I was to just send this into Design Space, it would just cut a square. Okay? But we will talk about that later. Let me get it back to where it was. I can also change how the corners look on an object. Let me zoom in using the plus key. If I zoom in on that corner, you can see that the stroke outline is rounded. I can make it sharp. If I was to change it to dashes, I will show you here the dashes have rounded ends. I can change that here with the caps. Flat caps, rounded caps, and then flat caps that are truncated right at the end of the stroke. And all of this stuff, I'm going to press minus to zoom out. All of this stuff I'm telling you about the fill and the stroke and all of these things is going to apply to any shape you make. It'll apply to a square, a circle, a polygon. It will apply if you draw a shape with the Bezier tool. You'll be able to change the fill, the stroke, and all of that stuff. Okay, I'm not going to go on to the circle right now. I'm going to show you a couple other things just with the rectangle. So right now, as I said, it's a rectangle and you could do certain things to it, like change the corner radius. Now, usually there's other things you're going to want to do which are going to require you to change this to a path. And we'll get into more detail about that later. Once it's changed into a path, you're not going to be able to do these square specific things anymore, and it's not going to show you these square specific tools when you click on it. But there are other things you won't be able to do until you change it to a path. So look here right now, what you see is it doesn't really have nodes, and I'll show you when I do change it to a path, it's going to have nodes. It's got these square rectangle specific tools. Now, if I go up to path, object to path, watch what the nodes do. All right. It's different now. Let me zoom in with the plus key. You can see now that we've got 2 nodes in each corner. Let's see, I'm going to do Control Z to undo it. That gets it back to, now it's a rectangle. Now if I make that sharp, and now change it to a path, object to path, click on this tool to see the nodes. And that's just got 1 node in each corner. And that's each place your line is changing directions. Now at this point, I don't have a thing, I can't make rounded corners, but I can pull it around like this. Okay? Now another thing I could do, I'm on the node tool here. You have to be on the node tool to see the nodes. I can click on this line and pull it up like that to bend it. Now if I click on the nodes, it gives me handles, these little handles here. I can change the curve with those handles also. Okay, I can do an inside curve, an outside curve. If I double click on a line while I'm on the node tool, I add a node. Now I can change that one around. Okay. There are different types of nodes. I will get into that later, but right now let's just say we want to change that one, just to let you know that there are different types of nodes. To select a node, click off of them and then just click on that node to select it. I can come up here to this right here, which is Make Selected Node a Corner. Double click on that and it changes this node. It changes the way the curve works. That makes this into a corner node. For right now, that is enough. You will just notice that there's 4 different types of nodes that you can use. Okay, so there is that. Now, I've showed you how to use the rectangle tool, the node tool. I've showed you the fill and stroke panel, and I've showed you, let's see, how to manipulate nodes. Okay, I think that's probably enough for right now, so I will stop this, and then for the next video I'll start right where I am now, and we'll do a couple of other things with that shape, and we'll add the circle shape into it too. Okay, ask me any questions and I'll try to clarify. Thanks for watching.